pristine world in which we now live. That, in broad summary, is a Judeo-Christian worldview. And when you depart from that, you have left a valid life that God has given to every person, a life that is worth living. In Matthew 18, they asked Jesus a very important question. Verse 1. At that time, the disciples came to Jesus and asked, "Who then is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven?" In other words, who is number one? Who is the most important entity on this earth, right? Who's the greatest? Who's the most important? Who is the most valuable? Who has the highest priority of any living thing in this world? That's what they asked Jesus. He answered, "Bring a child to me." And he set a child down before him. And Jesus said, looking at the little child, I believe, "Truly I say to you, unless you are converted and become like children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven." And then he adds, "Whoever then humbles himself as this child, he is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. And whoever receives one such child in my name receives me. And whoever causes one of these little ones who believe in me to stumble," and the word stumble there is scandalon, anyone who deceives, anyone who confuses, anyone who lies to, anyone who takes advantage of a child, says Jesus. It would be better for him to have a heavy millstone hung around his neck and to be drowned in the depth of the sea. And then Jesus says, "Woe to the world because of its stumbling blocks." In other words, the world has stumbling blocks, especially situated so children will stumble over them. For it is inevitable that stumbling blocks come, but woe to that man or that woman through whom the stumbling block comes. Did you listen and get that, what Jesus said about children? And we live, ladies and gentlemen, in a culture, in a world where children have stumbling blocks everywhere they turn. A good friend of mine, Erwin Lutzer, who was pastor in Moody, who I think is the best biblical authority on understanding our woke culture and putting it in a biblical context. He said a woman came up to him after church and said, "Pastor, I gave my 13-year-old daughter a cell phone when she was 13. And she said, I didn't know it was like giving her her first dose of heroin." That cell phone, those tablets, those computers that our children have, that is the instrument in this world that primarily educates them, gives them understanding of their emotions, of their heart, and the agenda for life. Now you can debate that, but you'll be 100% wrong. That's this generation. Our children get their entertainment there. They get their information there. And at very early ages, most of them have seen, heard, experienced sexuality in how many countless forms. And they were not ready for this. They were not ready. Dr. Ben Carson, close friend and brother of mine, as most of you know, one of the finest brain surgeons who ever lived. He operated primarily on children, Johns Hopkins. He explained to me about the brain. He talked about the legalization of marijuana. It sounds so great. He says what happens with the legalization of marijuana to children and young people's brain is absolutely tragic. IQ, sexual prowess, creativity, all of it gets dimmer and dimmer and dimmer because we need to know that the white gray matter and the gray matter, this white and gray matter that goes into the brain, it develops slowly through children, from birth slowly through children, and God in his great wisdom of creation sees that we do not develop into puberty until it comes time of transition, when all of these hormones come upon you and come upon our children. At the same time, they're viewing all of this that will scar them sexually for the rest of their lives. The New York Post, just a couple of months ago, wrote an article, a 16-year-old girl. She tells her story. She said, when I was 12, I thought, everything's messed up in me. I shouldn't be a girl, I should be a boy. And she said she told her parents. Her parents said, oh, we love you, and we want to make sure that you do whatever you want to do and become whatever you want to become, because everybody told her that gender is fluid. And in the article, she said, I'm now 16. And she said she's now going through a process of trying to reverse what had been medically accomplished. And she said, my life is in shambles. Now, interesting enough, in 2 European countries, well, this has been going on, believe it or not, longer than even the United States in great numbers of kids. 2 European countries have had wide surveys with literally thousands of people who have gone through sex-altering procedures. And the results is overwhelming that most of them, an overwhelming majority of them, regret it ever happened at all. And we know that most people who go through this state of confusion and dysphoria, in about 4 years they come out and begin to get their life together and understand that when God put a soul of a man in a man's body, that person is a man, and a soul in a female body, that person is a female. Most of them in the long run, if radical things haven't happened, do figure it out. That's the good news. We live in a crazy, crazy world. And that's who we are. That's what's about. And it's a part of the deadly evil that we have here. I want you to listen to one of my favorite authors. I could tell you this, but I'm going to read it. Dr. Peter Kreeft, Roman Catholic, teaches at Boston College. One of the greatest apologists for the Christian faith alive. Prolific author. I could tell you this, but I'm going to read you exactly what he said in this area. He asked the profound question that we need to have an answer to. Why do people want to change their gender? Think about it. His answer, a biblical answer. He says because the devil hates them and hates their happiness, so he confuses them by making them hate something good, something God designed and made, and something natural, their bodies. The devil hates everything natural because God created it. So the devil always loves to pervert natural things. The devil loves that for the same reason he wants men to hate their masculinity and pretend to be women, and women to hate their femininity and pretend to be men. The devil loves all lies. John 8, he's a liar, he's a killer. He creates stumbling blocks. He especially loves to corrupt innocent and childhood. Therefore, he loves abuse, especially by people children look up to. These who rape children's souls as well as their bodies, instead of saving them, even by doctors who surgically mutilate a child's sex organs instead of psychologically asking for the healing of their minds. Dr. Kraft writes, we should be compassionate toward people who want to change their gender. We cannot help them if we do not listen to them and understand them and feel that their souls are in the wrong bodies, that God made a mistake, that they know who they really are more than God knows. They need those struggling in these areas to find peace and unity in their identity. Our attitude towards transgender people should be the same as our attitude toward wounded soldiers. The church is indeed a field hospital on a battlefield. The church exists for the wounded. The church has only one qualification, and that is to be wounded. And ladies and gentlemen, in different sexual areas, we all qualify. Is that clear enough? Is that clear enough? Now, the many stumbling blocks that our kids have to face and stumble over, to tear down, jump over, go around, that's in our culture, they are especially found in our school systems. You know that if you hear what has happened in California or New York, Illinois, so many states in the curriculum, and even I said, well, those are those left-wing progressives over there, and they're doing crazy things to corrupt the children in the agenda, what they're teaching in school. Thank goodness I live in Texas, but then I remember Austin, Texas. Freudian slip. And I just bumped into something that in 2020, the Austin Independent School District established a curriculum change. Listen, grades 3 through 8, you are to distinguish biological sex, gender expression, gender identity, sexual orientation, and romantic attractions. 3 through 8. Central to the curriculum is what I've already said. Sex assigned to your birth doesn't necessarily mean the sex you are to live with the rest of your life. Vance Packard, one of our greatest sociologists, in a book he penned, we are in the middle of a sexual wilderness. Some of his scholarly friends said, why didn't you use the word revolution? And this sociologist said, I'll tell you exactly why. In a revolution, their goals, their aims, their desires, their ambition, there's a reason. But he said in a wilderness, like a sexual wilderness, said, you're lost. You have no sense of direction. Things are changing all around you and you don't know where you're going and where the end will be. Therefore, he said, accurately so, we are in a sexual wilderness. And all of us have been caught up in it. Every single person here in different stages of life. So let me say, if I ask anyone to stand up who has been absolutely pure in their thoughts, Jesus said, if you commit porneia, adultery in your heart, it is as if you had committed. If anybody here is absolutely perfectly pure all the way through your life and all your sexual questions, you've had all of them answered, I'm not going to ask you to stand. Because if there is such an individual on this planet, if they stood, they would just go right straight into heaven. So let's start right there and understand that all of us have had and continue to have conflicting views, lifestyles, actions, in the whole area of sex. So don't get too pious. There's no room for piosity in the whole area of sexuality in your life or in my life. The bottom line is, how do you raise lambs in a culture of wolves? Did you get that? How do we raise lambs in a culture, everywhere you look, of wolves? I looked up, how does a lamb defend itself? How do sheep defend themselves? They seem to be helpless to me. They don't have any claws. They can't run. They won't even drink moving water. How do we keep the wolves of the culture shearing our lambs before they're old enough to know what's going on in the whole confusing area of human sexuality? How do we raise lambs in a culture of wolves? I said, lambs can't defend themselves. But I looked it up and I found I was sort of wrong. They're slow and they don't have any claws or they don't bite. But they do have some defense mechanisms that God has given to them. They have a keen sense of smell. Oh, way, way out there. They have a keen sense of hearing. They can hear the crumple of a leaf way out there. And an unbelievable sense of sight to these lambs. They can see for over 1,500 yards. That's 15 football fields in distance. And I thought about that. How do we raise lambs in a culture of wolves, but they have this kind of ability? I'll tell you what, we parents, those who are surrounded with children, let me tell you what, we need to develop our sense of smell. That gut feeling you have that something's not right with Billy or with Alice. You better exercise a keen sense of smell from your gut. We do around here because we see kids when we say the light has gone out. And we notice it. All those in the business of bringing up lambs, you better develop a sense of smell. Also, you better learn how to listen. Don't talk so much. Listen, listen, listen. And ask God to help you to listen to those lambs. And then you have to see. Have to see who they're with. The families of their friends. Where they go. And that head down in that cell phone all the time. You had better be sure what's on that cell phone, in that computer, and in that laptop. Or I'll tell you, the wolves will destroy your lamb. The lambs have one other defense mechanism. It's the shepherd. It's the good shepherd, Christ. It's the shepherd of mom and dad. It's the shepherd of godly, loving friends. It's the shepherd you find in the body of Christ, the church. If you're trying to bring up your kids without them being faithful in training and nurture and right relationships in the body of Christ, let me tell you, there will be shepherds that will help you build the right stuff in their lives to get them through this world and not be sheared by the wolves that are everywhere. The shepherd. Also, shepherds have with them, really many times they have with them something else. They have a sheepdog, or sheepdogs, don't they? Huh? To help keep the flock together. And when one of these lambs, or the ewe or the ram in a herd of sheep, they are alerted by anything, you know the first thing the lambs do? They all run together in a congregation. They all run together. With the male, with the female, with the ewe and the lamb. And then there's sheepdogs there who heard